distinguished guests, welcome to today's event on preventing violence against children and promoting child-centered justice. It's organized by the Permanent Mission of Greece and co-sponsored by the OHCHR, UNICEF, and the Council of Europe. And I hope it provides us with an opportunity to exchange experiences, evidence, and good practices on one of the most pressing challenges facing our societies. In fact, there is no more urgent and important task facing all of us than to protect our children from being the victims, or conversely, the perpetrators of violence. The new digital environment, social media, cyberbullying, addictive algorithms have created new risks for children, compounding traditional risk factors. We need to understand this new reality and understand what tools we have to effectively protect our children from these new threats. We have the privilege today to have with us a very distinguished group of speakers, and we will hear national, regional, and international perspectives on a rights-based preventive policy. So without further ado, I have the honor to invite Mr. George Gerapetritis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, for his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished representatives of OHCHR, of UNICEF, and the Council of Europe, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to welcome you here today. We're gathered at the very heart of the global human rights architecture. This Council serves as the moral compass of our international community, constantly reminding us that our words must carry the weight of action. And nowhere is this action more urgent than in the protection of our children. Today, we meet to emphasize that our national strategies are not merely bureaucratic documents, but a living shield against violence, offering justice that heals, protects, and restores the dignity and future of every single child. This commitment is the natural evolution of the principles we have championed in this very hall. For decades, this Council has been the architect of a global consensus. Through its resolutions and mechanisms, the HRC has established a fundamental truth. Children are not objects of charity. They are subjects of rights. Greece has been a consistent and passionate supporter of this work. We have co-sponsored resolutions, engaged with the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and championed the rights of the most vulnerable. But today, we must look beyond the text that we adopt. We must look at the word as it is, not as we wish it were. We live in an era of multiple crises. As Greece assumes its seat as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, it is clear that whenever peace is shattered, children are the first to bleed. From the rubble of Gaza to the basements of Ukraine, and from the displacement camps of Sudan to the conflict zones of the Sahel, children are paying the price for wars they did not start. Let me be clear. For Greece, the Children in Armed Conflict agenda is a cornerstone of our tenure on the Security Council. We are committing to being their voice. We demand accountability. We demand that international humanitarian law, international law and human rights law be respected, not as suggestion, but as an absolute red line. However, violence is not limited to the battlefield. The Human Rights Council has rightly identified violence against children as a systemic threat in times of peace as well. It occurs in our homes, in our schools, and increasingly in the digital sphere. The Council has given us the roadmap. it has told us that prevention is better than cure. It has told us that justice for a child must look different from justice for an adult. But a roadmap is useless if we do not walk the path. The challenge we face today is implementation gap. How do we turn the noble words of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, signed here in Geneva, into reality in a neighborhood in Athens, in a village in Africa, or in a school in Asia? The answer lies in national action. International obligations must be translated into bold, coherent, and well-funded national policies. This is the path Greece has chosen. I am proud to share that we have launched a comprehensive national strategy for the prevention of violence against children and the child-friendly justice 2025-2030. I will not burden you with technical details. Instead, I want to share with you the philosophy, the vision that underpins this strategy. First, we are changing how we view justice. Putting a child behind bars is often an admission of society's failure. Our strategy aligns with European and international standards to promote restorative justice. We are shifting from a system that purely punishes to one that heals. We are moving towards institutional safeguards against unnecessary deprivation of liberty and strengthening post-detention reintegration. We want to reintegrate these children, not criminalize their future. Second, we are looking forward. The violence of the 21st century is hybrid. It is physical, but it is also digital. Our children inhabit a digital universe that offers immense knowledge, but also hits dark corners. Cyber violence, exploitation, and abuse. Greece's strategy treats the digital environment as a public space that must be safe. We are implementing strict digital responsibility frameworks and age verification mechanisms. We are building digital resilience, teaching our children not just how to use technology, but how to protect themselves from it. Third, and most importantly, prevention. We cannot wait for the bruise to appear or the crime to be committed. We're investing in early intervention. We're breaking the silence. We're strengthening the child houses to prevent secondary victimization. Excellencies, dear friends, this side event is not just about exchanging technical expertise. It is about renewing a vow. The Human Rights Council has done its job by setting the standards. The Security Council must do its job by enforcing peace. And we, as national governments, must do our job by implementing policies that touch the lives of real children. Protecting a child is not just a legal obligation under the UN Charter of the European Convention. It is the ultimate investment in our collective future. A child who grows up free from violence is a citizen who will build a world of peace. Greece is ready to lead the example. We're ready to listen, to learn, and to work with all of you. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, UNICEF, the Council of Europe, and every member state to make this vision a reality. Let us give our children the justice and the future they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Minister, for setting the stage and for these important remarks. I now have the honor to give the floor to Ms. Nada Al-Nashif, United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, for her keynote address. Thank you.
Thanks very much, dear Ambassador, and thank you to the Permanent Mission of Greece and to the Foreign Minister for his personal participation. It enriches our dialogue. And I am pleased on behalf of OHCHR to join our office's voice to this urgent call. Children do not belong in prisons. They belong in schools, in families, and in safe, supportive communities. The fewer children in the criminal justice system, the lower their exposure to violence, trauma, and lifelong harm. And yet, an estimated 1.3 to 1.5 million children are deprived of their liberty worldwide, and this is most likely an undercount. Most of these children come from vulnerable and marginalized backgrounds. Many have experienced poverty, discrimination, violence, or neglect. Many of the children that end up in detention have obviously lacked the adequate support that they could have had from families, from caregivers, and from communities. And so strengthening national child protection systems, as we just heard, grounded in prevention and early intervention, as His Excellency has just underscored, is essential if we want to keep children out of the justice system in the first place. The international legal framework has never been as comprehensive as it is today. The Convention on the Rights of the Child and established international standards on juvenile justice provide a very solid foundation for child-centered systems. The committee's general comment number 24 from 2019 offers authoritative guidance, emphasizing the importance of alternative measures, diversion, restorative justice, responses that uphold the best interests, indeed, and the dignity of the child. We are particularly concerned about developments in some countries, for example, Argentina and Sweden, where proposals are being considered to lower the minimum age of criminal responsibility. The Committee on the Rights of the Child establishes that the minimum age of criminal responsibility should be at least 14 years and commends states parties that have a higher minimum age, for instance, 15 or 16 years. Urging states parties not to reduce it under any circumstance. Neuroscience confirms that brain development continues well beyond 18 and into early adulthood. And that is why we call on states to consider extending juvenile justice principles to young adults up to 21 years of age. The purpose of a juvenile justice system is reintegration, not punishment. International law is unequivocal on this point. Deprivation of liberty must be a measure of last resort and for the shortest appropriate period of time. And yet in many contexts, detention remains a default response, often driven by fear and public pressure around youth violence. Repressive approaches do not make societies safer, they entrench harm. Children in detention also face heightened risks of violence by authorities, but also by peers. Corporal punishment, solitary confinement, excessive restraints, and other abusive practices all persist. States must adopt and implement comprehensive strategies that prevent and respond to all forms of violence against children in justice systems, whether they are physical, sexual, emotional, or even institutional. The recommendations of the Global Study on Children Deprived of Liberty that was presented to the General Assembly 6 years ago remains more urgent than ever. Prevent deprivation of liberty before it occurs, address the root causes, and ensure that no child is left behind bars when protection, support, and opportunity are what they really need instead. Let us, in partnership, commit to measurable reductions in child detention, stronger child protection systems, and the full implementation, again, the Minister underscored the implementation gap of the international standard. Children are rights holders to be protected, and the choices we make now will define not only their futures, but the fairness and the humanity of our societies as a whole. Thank you, Ambassador.
So thank you so much, dear Deputy High Commissioner. Now I invite Mr. Octavian Bivol, UNICEF Deputy Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished ministers, colleagues and partners. Allow me first to thank the Permanent Mission of Greece, OHCHR, and the Council of Europe for convening this timely discussion during the Human Rights Council. As His Excellency the Minister pointed out, today's event speaks directly to the core mandate of this Council, which is transforming human rights obligations into comprehensive, rights-based national policies that prevent violence and promote child-centered justice. Violence against children remains one of the most pervasive and underreported human rights violations worldwide. Globally, 1.6 billion children, or 2 in 3, regularly endure violent punishment at homes. Every 4 minutes, somewhere in the world, a child is killed by an act of violence. 90 million children alive today have experienced sexual violence, and 650 million girls and women, 1 in 5, were subject to sexual violence in childhood, including over 370 million who experienced rape or sexual assault. In fragile settings, girls face even greater risk, with prevalence estimates exceeding 1 in 4. Violence occurs in homes, schools, communities, institutions, justice systems, and increasingly, as it was already mentioned, in the digital environment, with profound consequences for children's development, mental health, education, and long-life well-being. It is not an isolated social issue. It is a structural failure, noted in inequality, discrimination, harmful norms, weak governance, and often fragmented systems. And prevention is indeed possible. The Convention of the Rights of the Child is clear. Article 19 obliges states to protect children from all forms of violence. The Convention and its optional protocols together establish a holistic framework requiring prevention, protection, and child-friendly justice. Comprehensive multi-sectoral national strategies matter. When properly designed and align justice, education, social welfare, health, and regulatory systems within a coherent framework grounded in the rights of the child. They move us beyond fragmented or reactive responses and toward prevention, child-centered responses that uphold dignity and participation and strengthen accountability. At the first ever Global Ministerial Conference on Ending Violence Against Children convened in Bogota in 2025, governments and partners committed to prioritizing 3 breakthrough approaches that promise the broadest and most enduring impact. This global call to action reflects a shared understanding on what we know that works and how we must now scale it up. First is universal access to parent and caregiver support. Preventing abuse begins by promoting safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. Governments can scale evidence-based parenting programs, structured support for parents, and complementary economic measures that reduce family stress. Prevention begins with strengthening families and supporting caregivers before crisis emerges. Second is universal access to safe and enabling school environments. School must function as protective spaces, not as sites for bullying or violence. Education systems should integrate positive discipline, anti-bullying approaches, social-emotional learning, and accessible mental health support. Safe schools protect children while strengthening learning outcomes and social cohesion. And third, integrated responses and support services for children affected by violence. When violence occurs, children must have immediate access to multidisciplinary, trauma-informed systems bringing together justice, health, and social services, supported by integrated case management and clear referral pathways. And critically, justice systems themselves must be child-friendly. Child-friendly justice is not a procedural luxury. It is a legal and moral obligation. It means ensuring that children are heard, informed, and treated with dignity and at every stage of proceedings. It means adapting procedures to children's age and maturity, safeguarding them from intimidation and re-traumatization, ensuring access to legal assistance. It also means limiting the use of deprivation of liberty and prioritizing diversion, non-custodial measures, and restorative approaches, which have already been mentioned. Experience across regions shows that predominantly punitive responses to children in conflict with law are ineffective and may exacerbate marginalization and reoffending. Many children who enter justice systems are themselves victims of violence, neglect, and social exclusion. Therefore, justice systems must respond with protection, rehabilitation, and reintegration, not cause further harm. Prevention and justice reforms are inseparable. When children are protected early, fewer come in contact with the law. When justice systems are humane and restorative, cycles of violence are disrupted. These solutions are mutually reinforcing, but they only succeed when embedded within stronger national child protection systems. This requires professionalizing social service workforce, coordinated government structures, and reliable data systems. Sustained and predictable public financing is the bridge between commitment and impact. Child protection and child-friendly justice must be treated not as discretionary spending, but as a strategic investment in human capital and the rule of law. Against the background of progress in violence prevention and strengthening child protection and justice system, the last 5 years in particular have witnessed an exponential rise in violence and abuse online. Technological change is not a separate child protection issue. It is a stress test of our systems. The digital environment often amplifies existing vulnerabilities and exposes gaps in regulation, prevention, and service delivery. Online and offline harms are increasingly interconnected. And the same high-impact solutions, parenting support, safe schools, and accessible response and support services must be equipped to address technology-facilitated violence. This requires updating legal and regulatory frameworks, upskilling frontline workers, and ensuring child protection systems which are capable to responding effectively on emerging risks. It also requires engagement with those creating and operating digital environments, including the private sector, to ensure children's rights and safety are embedded in digital governance. For UNICEF, its strategic plan places protection from violence as a core impact result, committing to protect 350 million children globally from violence. In partnership with governments, UNICEF works to prevent violence and harmful practices in all contexts and to ensure that every child who experiences violations, including survivors of sexual violence, have access to justice and timely and effective services anchored in survivor-oriented approaches across prevention and response. Ultimately, I would like to focus the attention on accountability as a defining issue. If violence remains widespread, it is not because solutions are unknown. It is because implementation is uneven, financing is insufficient, and coordination is weak. As the Human Rights Council, this discussion must be about measurable progress. It must be about ensuring that commitments translate into protection for every child. Without sustained political will, adequate public financing, and transparent accountability mechanisms, we will continue to fail short of our commitments, and children will continue to bear the consequences. The evidence is clear, the tools are available, the responsibility rests with us. Let the Council reaffirm that violence against children is preventable and that prevention is a matter of governance, justice, and rights. Children are not asking for charity, again, as His Excellency the Minister said at the beginning. They have the right to protection, justice, and to systems that work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for that, especially accountability and financing, so important. So now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Miroslav Papa, Special Representative of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe to the UN.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Greece, for actually initiating a side event on this important topic. And I'm very pleased to be today actually to add the Council of Europe's voice as a pan-European organization to the importance of this topic, and also to outline briefly what actually the organization is doing in this context. Protecting and promoting children's rights at the Council of Europe takes a variety of forms, from developing and monitoring legal standards, elaborating awareness raising and training tools, to provide technical support to individual member states in specific areas. It is the Council of Europe's strategy for the rights of the child 2022-2027, which provides the basis as well as the framework for protecting the rights of all children across Europe. This strategy is anchored firmly in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and in the European Convention on Human Rights, as well as other international human rights instruments. It has 6 strategic objectives, 2 of which directly address the topic of today's event. The first one, freedom from violence, and the second one, child-friendly justice for all children. Under the Council of Europe strategy, violence against children is understood as a human rights violation. It covers all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse. Under this strategic objective, the Council of Europe has adopted several texts recently. A thematic guidance on safeguarding children from the risks of accessing online pornographic content. This text calls for the urgent need to safeguard children from exposure to pornographic content, both intentionally and unintentionally, enabled by the rise in digital and online technologies. It also calls for the need to educate and support children, their families, caregivers, and their communities, including schools and civil society services, by encouraging them to develop positive relationships and sexuality in the face of the global pornography juggernaut. This guidance note refers to good practices and suggests measures that member states can take to protect children from the harms of online pornography. The second one is a study on sexual violence and harmful sexual behavior displayed by children, nature, causes, consequences, and responses, which addresses harmful sexual behavior not only understood as perpetrated by adults on children, but between minors themselves. This issue is explicitly recognized by the Council of Europe's Convention on the Protection of Children Against Sexual Exploitation and Sexual Abuse, better known as the Lanzarote Convention, which provides that intervention programs or measures meet the developmental needs of children who sexually offend, including those who are below the age of criminal responsibility. The study findings include that awareness of this reality and responses vary considerably across Council of Europe member states, that it is important for the issue to be approached with sensitivity, placing the child at the center of policy and practice responses, that holistic approaches are more effective than those that simply target the harmful sexual behaviors in isolation from these factors, and, above all, early interventions which are supportive and, wherever possible, avoid criminalization of children are warranted. A further step that has been taken since this study was adopted is the drafting of a recommendation on age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education to strengthen responses for inter alia preventing and combating violence against children, including sexual violence and harmful or risky behavior, which will be finalized and adopted this year. Violence against children is pervasive, and with today's technological advances, we are always a few steps behind in tackling the various forms it can take. Based on the Lanzarote Convention, we are very vigilant about the facilitation of child sexual exploitation and sexual abuse through information and communication technologies. We are, of course, deeply concerned by the explosion of AI-generated child sexual abuse material and nudifying apps, and plan to come up with a committee statement on the issue this coming June. Later this year, we will also publish a report assessing how the 48 state parties to the Lanzarote Convention address challenges related to the sharing of sexual images and videos created by children themselves. In the context of technological advances, you may be interested in an upcoming event on 4th of June this year in Strasbourg that can be followed online and will address social media and children's mental health. Coming to the second objective, child-friendly justice for all children, under this strategic objective, the Council of Europe has developed guidelines on child-friendly justice in 2010, which are still widely applied to assist member states in adapting their justice systems to better meet the needs of child victims, witnesses, and offenders. These guidelines aimed at guaranteeing children's access to justice, appropriate treatment, and participation in civil, administrative, and criminal proceedings. A joint EU Council of Europe child-friendly justice project is currently being implemented and is among the activities that have led to the publication of the child-friendly justice assessment tool, designed to support member states in evaluating and strengthening their justice systems to ensure that they are truly child-friendly. To ensure a child-friendly justice, the Council of Europe continues to provide support to member states in their implementation of the Barnahus Children's House model, a multidisciplinary and interagency child-friendly justice approach to addressing violence, which continues to grow. In addition, we are developing a recommendation on multidisciplinary and interagency services for child-friendly justice, including operational guidelines expected to be finalized later this year. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, today is a very good opportunity to remind that justice must include children, and the justice systems must take into due consideration their full protection, their views, their best interest. This requires work in synergy and additional efforts of all of us, the states, universal and regional organizations, public authorities, and all professionals involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now, last but certainly not least, I would like to invite Dr. Vassiliki Artinopoulou, Chair of the Greek Committee on Violence Against Children and one of the architects of our national strategy, to deliver her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished ministers and representatives. It's a great honor to present today the Greek National Strategy for the Prevention of Violence Against Children and Child-Centered Justice 2025 to 2030 at this high-level event dedicated to advancing children's rights and preventive public policies. Many thanks to the Permanent Mission of Greece for the honorary invitation to be here with you today. The process began 2 years ago in February 2024, when the Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, appointed a high-level committee of 7 academic international experts with a mandate to draft and deliver a comprehensive national policy on preventing violence against children and child-centered justice. I had the honor to be the chair of this committee. The committee was granted with full access to any public administrative data, interministerial cooperation, and critically complete academic independence. The institutional design was deliberate. Evidence, not ideology. Prevention, not punishment. Rights, not rhetoric. The political context in that period was sensitive. A series of high-profile incidents of juvenile violence had generated public anxiety and a kind of moral panic. In such circumstances, usually, states may be tempted to respond with isolated punitive measures. However, Greece chose a different path. Instead of responding case by case, we invested in a systemic strategy aimed at long-term prevention and child-centered justice, fully aligned with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, fully aligned with the Child-Friendly Justice at Council of Europe and the European documents. So this strategy, and I'm very happy to share with you that this is the strategy. It's about 130 pages, and we translate it in English, and we share it like, you know, a model and like to have a basis for the discussion. But this strategy is not merely a national action plan. because it embodies a structural rethinking of how the state conceptualizes childhood, violence, responsibility, and justice. So this strategy represents a structural shift in governance from fragmented reactive responses to an integrated, preventive, and rights-based framework. It is a transition, I could say, from managing incidents to transforming systems, from policy silos to coordinated multi-level action grounded in children's rights. And this is the landmark commitment by Greece to embed children's rights at the heart of the governance, translating international obligations into concrete, time-bound action. The methodology was rigorous. It was the first time that we tried to do this achievement because we're experts, we're not policymakers, we're not diplomats, but our task was very concrete. And though in this case we reviewed 24 thematic action plans. I mean, every state party has a strategy on the prevention of violence. They have strategies on preventive of bullying. They have strategies on justice systems. So what happened? In Greece, we had 24 relating national action plans. We had to review, we had to extract the information, and we have to combine all of them with a vision in 2030. So we also had administrative data, statistics, and we reviewed everything. We also consulted and we did original research with professionals, many focus groups, many research has been done. We deliberated a lot. For us, institutional partners were UNICEF, was the Council of Europe, was other bodies and institutional partners. So the result is here. After 1 year and some months, we delivered and we presented the strategy. And the strategy has mostly 3 pillars. The first one is violence prevention. And in this pillar, we address and we combine domestic violence, school bullying, online harm, community and extremist violence, abuse in sports environments. So prevention is treated as a systemic public obligation. Schools, families, digital platforms, communities, and institutions must operate coherently, not in isolation. The second pillar is the child-centered justice. In line with Articles 37 and 40 of the Convention and other document of the Council of Europe on child-friendly justice, we reframe juvenile justice as a system of protection, rehabilitation, and reintegration. We strengthen all alternative measures and restorative justice mechanisms, enhance specialized services for children in conflict with law, and also our focus was to improve the conditions, the detention conditions in accordance with international standards. However, child-centered justice also requires to move beyond binary thinking. The same child may require protection, accountability, therapeutic intervention, and social support simultaneously at the same time. Justice system must be capable of recognizing complexity rather than imposing fixed identities. And this is the third pillar that needs also societal mobilization and horizontal coherence. And we introduce 5 horizontal policies, an integrated national recording system. We have instances of violence or victimization in different parts of the country, but is there any system to register the case and to follow up the case? What happened in this child? Behind every case, there are children. So we need a more coherent and integrated recording system, expansion of mental health services, systemic research development, and of course, sustainable public awareness. What's new in this strategy? It is in the title. The title is a strategy on prevention of violence and child-centered systems. So the main argument, the main normative, it is that if we prevent child victimization, we prevent children's involvement with the law. And this is not a rhetorical statement. It is a conclusion supported by many research findings. And we can see that in the life histories of many children in conflict with law, we constantly identified prior exposure to violence. Domestic violence, domestic abuse, neglect, bullying, community violence, even structural marginalization. So victimization and offending are not isolated categories. They are often a sequential experience within the same developmental trajectory. And this is the main argument of the strategy. And at the same time, we conclude that labels as victim and offender are analytically insufficient and normatively problematic when applied to children, because childhood is a dynamic developmental phase. A child who appears before the justice system as an offender may previously have been a victim, and if early victimization is not addressed, the risk of conflict with the law increases. So this is the main concept and the main philosophy of the strategy. Allow me just to be concrete. I know that the time is running, just to show the recommendations of the strategy. And we have, for the school violence and the prevention of bullying, we try to change the pattern. Until now, we realize that violence and violent behavior is a reaction to any conflict, is a means of communication. So changing this pattern, and if we learn children from early stage in the education to adopt a non-violent communication, to adopt empathy, to know how to react in a conflict without violence, this is a learning behavior. And this kind of knowledge and skills should be embedded in the education system from the very beginning. So this is a flag policy for the prevention. There are many policies, new policies, and almost 70 measures. Addressing domestic violence, we make priority positive parenting programs, because we know that there is need to know and to have skills, new parents, even parents before having a child, and they are interested in. So we have include all these categories. And also some other measures to tackle domestic violence that still remains one of the most underreported forms of abuse. In the digital sphere, actually, the minister addressed this issue. We introduced digital responsibility at the age of 15, combined with strengthened age verification mechanism and parental capacity building. Community level, we promote community prevention networks. We promote participatory municipal council for children, from children, and measures to counter extremist and racist violence. Hate speech and hate crimes are very common at community violence. So we need a new model of how the children will become very good and democratic citizens. In the justice sector, in the justice level, we see juvenile justice as a framework of protection, rehabilitation, and reintegration. For child victims, we have special measures, and we propose to the government on the child houses, the bar house model, how to be there for every child being a victim of any crime. We don't make distinction between different types of crimes, but we do listen the needs of the victims if they are children. The aim here is to prevent secondary victimization. So I'm closing. There are also the horizontal policies, as I said, and I found it very important to have these cross-cutting policies. The work that we have done is ambitious, and it has been delivered. Now, Greece started to implement the national strategy. And we have some certain indicators to monitor the strategy. So hopefully, maybe next year or in a couple of years, we'll be here again reporting and to see the results and the impact. But it was also a challenge within the committee, because we were 7 academics with different backgrounds. So we have to find a common language. We have to navigate in disciplinary differences, in diverse conceptual frameworks, and negotiate priorities in the spirit of a shared responsibility. We also faced some methodological constraints because we didn't have many research data on some types of abuse. For example, in bullying or in online violence, we do have findings. But for domestic violence, for child sexual abuse, we don't have concrete data. So we had to discuss and to negotiate how these gaps could be bridged. Excellencies, what makes the strategy distinctive? It's not only the content, but it's the philosophy. It affirms that child protection is not a peripheral social policy. It is a central dimension of democratic governance. So, our experience demonstrates that even if in moments of public pressure, states can choose systemic reform over reactive legislation, evidence over emotion, and rights-based prevention over punitive reflexes. Children at risk are not statistics. They are rights holders. They are citizens in a formation. And the quality of our democracies will ultimately be measured by how effectively we protect them from violence and enable their full development. I'm here to discuss if your state party, your countries would like to share more about their experience and to exchange views. I'm very happy and honored to be here and go on with this strategy. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for that, and it was really very interesting and inspiring, I think. I encourage anybody to reach out to Dr. Artinopoulou. I understood that one of the main, one thing where we need to work more is on data, and both to monitor progress, but also to see the scale of the problem. Just before opening the floor, I would like to ask a question to the Deputy High Commissioner and the Minister, because now we are discussing about a very serious problem in a relatively secure environment, not in a war zone. So how, just very briefly, if you have some reflections on how it's one of the priorities, as the Minister said, of Greece in the Security Council, children in armed conflict, how does that, if you have, it's another enormous topic, of course.
I mean, obviously, I think this idea of how we work in an integrated fashion, I was thinking we've tackled a lot of things, but it is compounded really results. What deprivation, marginalization, I think human rights data provides the ability to monitor trends and patterns. And we know, particularly in conflict, that children in their communities are often missing basic needs. It comes back to the provision of education, of health. I think a lot of what you said, and understanding how violence perpetuates and cycles of violence continue to reproduce themselves. We were in a discussion on mediation just before, and I think this thing of how looking backwards also, you see what compounded trauma looks like. So I think the conflict area is a little microcosm of what we see in societies at large. But I think it's been very convenient to say this only happens in conflict. And that's why, sort of for us anyway, this was a great opportunity to talk about actually juvenile justice, but children in normal settings, normal, where again, many of these transgressions continue to take place. So I think it's great that we've touched on all of it. And I think obviously we're working very closely with UNICEF, with the Committee on the Rights of the Child to make sure that exactly as the Minister said, these gaps between international standards and national standards, and then between national standards and their implementation, whether it's human rights law or humanitarian law, I think there is a lot to do there.
Thank you so much for this. First of all, I'd like to point out that although in a state of peace, one would presume that the situation is much better, the truth is not as such. The implementation gap is even bigger in this respect, not because we have high expectations of normal circumstances when it comes to children, but most predominantly because what happens in all countries is now a footage of hostility. For example, we do encounter religious intolerance. We do encounter issues of poverty, of discrimination. We do see an issue of divergences in terms of wealth. The lack of young children to just access education, it's a huge issue, and it happens in most advanced communities and states. So we have to be very sincere, very open, and very frank. In a state of armed conflict, indeed, there is an increased level of difficulty. We now have more than 60 armed conflicts. More than 10 of them are considered to be a high-scale conflicts, including more than 1,000 victims, including a high level of children. But the truth is that we need to start thinking also about societies in peace, because there is where we can do some meaningful steps. It only takes the political will and the distribution of adequate funds in order to develop synergies towards better schooling, towards provision of essential facilities, and especially to secure a friendly environment for the children. So for us, within the Security Council, it is our job as penholders of the Committee of the Children in Armed Conflicts, but it is equally important that we secure better lives for children also in societies in peace, because it is there where we can have a meaningful improvement for the children.
Thanks for that. And now I open the floor, but I warn our guests that the less questions there are, the more time you will have to enjoy the sandwiches and refreshments we have outside. So the floor is open if there are questions.
Of course, if I may, before closing, I would like to make a statement, because today we mark for the 4th anniversary of the Russian aggression of Ukraine, and we have a huge number of children who have been the victims of this conflict, and we have also the issue of abducted children in Ukraine. So we all need to take on a very high level of self-criticism on what we have done and on what we haven't done in order to prevent the situation. We all obviously condemn the aggression, but definitely this is not enough. We need to take some proper action on the field. So thank you.
Thank you.